Hey everyone, and welcome back to a brand new episode of Slay with Zay, and I am your trans tutor. Yes, I know there's a couple of things different about me. My hair looks totally different. Yes, I know. But there's also a couple of other things too. But we're not here to discuss that. We are here to cover more trans content. So, this particular episode, we're going to be covering transgender statistics. And in the previous episode, we talked about transphobia. So these statistics are going to be rooted in transphobia. So in the last episode, we talked about how transphobia is going to be a personal dislike or aversion to transgender people. And eventually those ideologies, that dislike, that aversion is going to seep into people's professional life. It's going to seep into their academic life. It's going to seep into their medical life. And those fields are going to be affected by transphobia. And we're going to run some statistics to show, in comparison to people who are not trans, so cisgender people, how transphobia affects us at a societal level. So let's get into some transgender statistics provided by some viable sources from the National Center of Transgender Equality, from the Transgender Law Center, and from the Human Rights Campaign, or HRC. Viable, credible sources that are dedicated to dismantling transphobia. So let's run some of these statistics to find out how transphobia affects transgender people at large. Let's go. Let's start off at the beginning. So if you become aware of your trans identity while you're still a teenager, chances are you're probably still living at home with your family if you have that privilege and that luxury. However, because the world that we live in, this society that we stand in, is already indoctrinated to be transphobic, that could cause some problems. So much to the point, the extreme is that we could be expelled from your family because of their transphobic ideologies. They may not want to have anything to do with you. But perhaps you have a friend that you could rely on. But remember, they're also indoctrinated into the idea of transphobia. So maybe they don't want anything to do with you either. So now you have in a situation where you don't have any familial or friend support, or you don't have any type of income to support yourself. So now in the world that we live in, we know that having money is also having access to various different things. So if you wanted to get a job, if you're able to, that would be the next credible step in order to get money, in order to find a place to live, and all of those steps. However, because of how transphobia works and how people in our society are already indoctrinated into it, there may be some hurdles that you have to jump over. So let's just kind of run some numbers here. So from 2016-2015 is roughly when these statistics are coming from. So it is estimated that 29% of transgender people live underneath the poverty line. 29%. So without actual income, without actual money, how are we going to sustain ourselves? And that's 29% as a whole, 39% for Black transgender people, and 48% for Latinx people, and 35% for Native and Pacific Islander transgender people. So without having access to money, it's going to cause some very trying times and some very challenging situations, to the point maybe that you even begin to participate in sex work. And sometimes sex work can lead to some very, very challenging things, which we'll talk about in a second. Now, I know that just escalated very quickly, but these are the stakes at which transgender people are living their lives. To be their most authentic self, they are willing to take their bodies and put it in the possession of someone else for just a few dollars. And nothing is wrong with sex work. We are sex positive on this platform. However, if you don't have to do it, you shouldn't have to do it if you don't want to. But suppose that you were forced in a situation where you had to receive some kind of income. So you decide to do sex work because you choose sex work instead of going to apply for a job. Because the bosses at the job think that you will be a distraction as a transgender person. Or they don't understand how transgender people display themselves or how they present their expression to the world. So at a cost, they don't hire you. So it's estimated that 27% of transgender people have faced employment issues. 27%. So that it would include not being able to be hired because because the person is transphobic. Or if they were to get a job, they would be harassed. It's estimated that 90% of transgender people at their job have been harassed. 90%. 9 times out of 10. And I can speak for my own personal self, is that I have been harassed for being a transgender person by not only customers, but also by also other associates that work at the company as well. So if you're working in an environment that's not conducive, that doesn't promote your overall well-being, you're going to find somewhere that's going to make you feel good. And if you can't find somewhere, if you don't have access because you're living in an area that has poor access to financial situations, you're going to make decisions like sex work. Again, sex work. And sometimes sex work can be a good thing because they pay you well. However, it can be very, very dangerous. As I said, it gets very dangerous. So much to the point where transgender people are actually losing their lives. On this year, 2020, at this point in time, as me recording this, there have been 40 transgender murders that have taken place. All of which have been inter-partner violence. So, 54%, more than half, inter-partner violence. And most of them are Black trans women or Latinx or brown trans women. And this again stems from transphobia. Transphobia. So, the men that want to partake or who have an attraction to trans women cannot get past their transphobia. And so, at a cost, in order to save their face, in order to save themselves from having ridicule, to be labeled as something that they're not, or to be demonized, as we've talked about in previous episodes, they take it upon themselves to take the lives of transgender people. Again, specifically Black transgender women, Latinx transgender women, and brown transgender women. 54% inter-partner violence. Now, is it worth it? Do you get the support that you need? Is it better than living on the street? Perhaps you would think about going to a homeless shelter. But if you're a transgender woman, there's policies and legislation administered by this previous administration that says that they have ways to clock if you're transgender or not. Your height, the tone of voice, you have muscles, or you have facial hair, or whatever the situation may be. But as we've discovered, cisgender women also have some of these attributes as well. 30% of women's shelters do not allow transgender women. 30%. So if you're on the street, can't find anywhere to go, no one's supporting you, and you have to perform sex work and you can't go anywhere. So now you have all these obstacles to face. All these obstacles. Transphobia must be eliminated so these statistics can change. And we haven't even gotten to the more severe things. So for example, if you have no place to go because women's shelters won't take you, or you perhaps live on the street, you're probably living in places that are not sanitary, not clean, and of course you're going to get sick. but it's estimated that 22% of transgender people do not have any health coverage. Granted, health coverage is expensive in the United States, but 22% don't, and 32% for people of color, transgender people. 32% for Black and Latinx native transgender people. Or if you perhaps you do have access to a doctor, perhaps you do, but perhaps the doctor isn't educated, his transphobia seeps in. 29% have been refused by a doctor because they are transphobic. So there's a great deal of things that you have to jump over. And unfortunately, we live in a society where transgender people, in addition to the rest of the queer community, have been placed on a back burner, as the AIDS and the HIV crisis of the 80s and the 90s is still trickling down to its final point, still in 2020. It is estimated that 4 times more likely for a transgender woman to contract HIV. And if she's having sex work and probably not using protection, I'm sure it's even higher. So now we're at the very end, and the most severe, of course. So let's just kind of recap it. You've come out as transgender. You've been expelled from your family and your friends. You're trying to find a way. You're trying to make a way. Can't get hired at a job because of transphobia. So what you do is you decide to partake in sex work to save yourself and get access to money so you can have access to other things. But perhaps you're getting bruised and beaten up and things of that nature. So now you're getting beat up and you want to escape. You want to go to a homeless shelter so you can find some help. They don't take you because you're transgender. And then you're living on the street. You're trying to figure out what you're going to do. And you end up getting sick. Can't see a doctor because they're transphobic. Maybe one of the Johns or one of the clients that you had while you were practicing sex work gave you HIV. Now, you're sick, alone, and slowly dying. It's estimated that 41% of transgender people have attempted suicide. 41%, almost half. Particularly transgender men, which again, I cannot speak for. So perhaps you want to tune into some transgender men who probably have some words about that. 41% attempt to suicide, take their own life, because if everyone doesn't want me here, why should I be? There's lots of different scenarios. There's no perfect formula, but this is the reality of a multitude of transgender people. Yes, we have legislation that protects us at higher levels now. Yes, we have certain equalities, but it doesn't eliminate transphobia at its root. Education, knowledge. In order for it to dissipate, in order for it to be completely gone, the masses, the world is going to have to change. And this video is just part of that. Well, I know this episode wasn't as thrilling or exciting as one of the other ones, or even as humorous, or perhaps it wasn't even enjoyable. But this is the information that needs to be known. We learned and educated ourselves through the last few episodes to understand transgender people at a societal level. Now you can begin to see why transphobia and why transgender people deserve to exist, and transphobia needs to be eliminated. It's hazardous and it's dangerous. These numbers can change. And in some situations, they have changed quite drastically. But We need better. We have to change these statistics. Be a part of the change. Educate yourself. Challenge people. Challenge yourself. So, thank you so much for watching this video. Again, I'm sorry that it was heavy, but it's important information that must be said. Follow me on Instagram, Facebook, and Twitter. And subscribe on YouTube, all at Slay with Zay. Use the hashtag Slay with Zay so we can keep everything in one concentrated area so we can have a conducive, beautiful conversation. There's only a few more episodes left to this season. So please submit any questions you have so I can cover them about any of the previous episodes. And I will see you next time on another lovely episode of Slay with Zay.